Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
Do you have a process for planning and setting up goals for the upcoming year for your practice? And most importantly, does this process work? Meaning, when you do it, do you actually realize the goals that you set, or at least an approximation of them, when the following year is over? For most people, at least the ones I've spoken with, the answer to this question, believe it or not, is no. I mean, people make New Year's resolutions all the time. But we're not talking about that you want to start hitting the gym or stop eating, ice cream or something. We're talking about planning for your business. So most people I talk to about this, they don't really have a process. And often when I bring the subject up, specifically longer-term planning, I get two reactions almost in succession. The first one is people love the idea. They love it. Oh, I want to plan. I want to do this. And then when you start to get into detail about what's involved, with quite a few people, you get sort of a glazed over look or a bored look, almost a bored overwhelm, for lack of a better description. But we know, all of us know this, that satisfaction, real satisfaction, comes from planning something out and pulling it off exactly as planned. It's something that we want. The key is the planning. And when you're doing longer-term planning for a business that has a bunch of employees, a number of variables, and different aspects of operation, it becomes, at least from the outside looking in, far more complex. And look, I'm in no way short of procedures to use to do this that I could share with you. And we have tons of things I could give you that are available. But I'm assuming you're a busy working doctor or office manager trying to keep up with things on a day-to-day basis versus a CEO or business owner that has all the time in the world to dedicate to this planning action. So with that in mind, I wanted to dedicate this week's episode to giving you something a little different, something that's workable, like a rundown of steps, including a checklist that goes along with it, that you can use to plan out the next year, in this case, 2026. And have it come off exactly the way that you hoped, or even better. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And I think the best place to start with all of this, I always start that way, the best place to start. I guess it's because it's the best place to start. That was dumb. Anyway, I think the best place to start is to look at the two reasons why yearly planning for many people or practices, especially when you're doing bigger plans, tends to bog down. You need to know these things so when you're going through it, you don't get into the same problem and get stuck. So these reasons are pretty simple. The first one is people make plans that are, and I hate to use this word, unrealistic. Now, the idea of what's real and not real is debatable. For instance, you could have a schedule coordinator and you tell them, look, I want all my primary procedures in the morning. And, you put them on the job and you tell them to start scheduling and they go, look, nobody wants to come in the morning because they can't take off work and your mornings are empty, and then you find yourself prepping 4 crowns at 6:30 p.m. Then you get somebody else and they go, okay, and your schedule's full in the morning. So the goal there was obviously realistic. It can be done. It's just the person you had doing it said it couldn't be done. So this idea of quote unquote realistic is to a large degree in the eye of the beholder. But there's also a degree of observation required here. If I said get in a car and drive from Miami, Florida to New York City in 6 hours, that's not realistic unless, you're on the Jetsons or something. Like, you can't do that without killing yourself or violating a bazillion laws. Or if I said I need you to prep 47 crowns in the next 2 hours, not realistic. Can you prep 47 crowns? Yes. Can you do it in 2 hours? No. Maybe you can. I don't know. But I'm just looking for examples here. I'm exaggerating a bit. What you see is, there's a certain amount of things that you can do that are real and attainable, maybe with a bit of a stretch and some effort and some push. And as a person's ability increases, they can get more done in less time, which is the whole purpose of training anyway. But what I see goes wrong with planning is people will make these lists, right? And you want people shooting for the stars. You don't want too little. Okay, like someone's doing 80 a month and their goal is to do 81, right? You want people shooting for the stars, but you see people put things on a list that would take, what you see people do it on a day-to-day to-do list. Their to-do list would take them 4 days to accomplish. Yet there it is, it's the to-do list, and then they sit at the end of the day and they go, oh, I stink, I didn't get all this done. Well, it wasn't really doable. I wouldn't go up to you and tell you if your practice was doing 100 a month, you need to do 650 next month, unless you'd been doing that and dropped to 100. Do you see? So you need to be able to do a real assessment. You want some challenge, you want some pressure, you don't want too little challenge, right? But it has to be real, and it has to be something you're comfortable in that you feel is actually attainable, maybe with a little bit of a stretch, but it's attainable. So when you're planning, you want to plan with that reality in mind. Otherwise, you're going to plan for next year and basically plan out the next 10. Which is fine if you know it's going to take you 10 years to accomplish that, but when you decide you're going to do it in a year, you're just basically setting yourself up for a humongous loss. Now, the second reason is a little related to the first, is people tend to have trouble confronting too much. So they give themselves too much and they can't confront too much, okay? So whatever you're setting yourself up for, it has to be confrontable. Let me give you an example of this. I had a newer client. I think I've told this story in the podcast, and she was a newer power client. We sat down and I said, okay, good. This was a long time ago, back in the olden days of buggy whips and, carts and horses. I'm kidding. Anyway, but it was a while back. Anyway, I sit down with her and we go over, okay, what do you want to get done now? What do we need to get done to kind of move yourself up, start moving your practice up to the next level? We make a list of 20 things that she needs to get done. I send her off. It was like 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, whenever I saw her again, I look and we go through all of these, and she goes, how many of these did you get done? 0. She's a working mom. She's running a full-time practice. She's chair sat all the time. And she had 20 things she was supposed to do and didn't do any of them. So what we did was we dialed it back. We went and took a look at, what are the 3 most important things you need to get done right now? And it was the stupidest thing you ever saw. It was a piece of paper with 3 things on it that she had to get done. So we made that list, and I sent her off with this. And then when I saw her in the next week or two, she actually had gotten them done. The point being is, the 20 was just too much. You give her the 3, that's confrontable. But this applies to everybody. If, you look at what you have to do today, and then I were to add 2 or 3 times the amount of work to that, you go, this is impossible to do. So this is kind of related to the first problem. But people tend to go into overwhelm if you give them too many data points or things that they have to look at. So what that tells you when you're planning is you want to focus on what's really, really important. Okay? Because also when you give yourself a list of everything, you tend to lose track of what's urgent, what do I really have to do? And, that would be cool. Not that big of a deal. You have to be able to focus on these are the things that are really, really critical that need to get done. So those are 2 things. You tend to put too much on there, and then because there's too much, you go into overwhelm, and then nothing gets done. And I don't know if you've ever found yourself in that situation. I know that I have in the past. All right, so with that in mind, let's look at this New Year planning. And I have a checklist for this for you. I used the word "for" too many times there. It's downloadable on the episode webpage. It's the New Year planning checklist. You can download it. So first off, when would you want to do this planning? Now, we're talking about planning for 2026, but this would still hold for when you're in 2026, planning for 2027. When would you want to do it? You might go, well, the first week I'm back in January. Wrong. You don't want to do it in January because by the time you actually start getting things geared up, it's February. Ideally, you want to start planning next year no later than early December, early mid at the latest. You want to start planning next year. You can even go earlier than that, right? The only problem is you don't have the full returns of the year that you're in, so you don't have a point of comparison fully yet. But you want to start late in the prior year. Not too early, but also not too late, because you want to hit the ground in January running. So if you're doing this meeting, who do you want to do it with? Well, you want to do this with, obviously, yourself as the owner doctor, your office manager, and any other executives you have in the practice. If you have a larger practice, you might have an office manager and a couple of junior managers, maybe one's in charge of the front, one's in charge of the back. You might have a PR officer or something like this. Basically, any executives that have bearing and decision-making capabilities within the practice. And I would do this on a day where you're not going to be distracted. I wouldn't try doing this during patient hours. Where anybody could be called out of the room. Because keep in mind, this is something I've pointed out to people for years, just because you can tell what kind of person I am, which you may not like me afterwards. But if I have 10 people in a meeting and 1 or 2, let's say one person makes those 10 people wait, we can't start without this 10th person. So I have 9 sitting at the table and the 10th is supposed to arrive. When that person arrives 10 minutes late, they literally wasted 100 minutes combined, or 90 minutes at least, because each person there wasted 10 minutes of their lives and workday. So you have to have this set up so no one is going to leave. No one's got another commitment where they can actually just focus on what it is that you are doing when you're doing it. And look, this might take a couple hours, so you might want to have some snacks. You order in lunch, you have some coffee, whatever. And but again, I've seen clients go off-site to do this because they're afraid they're going to start getting phone calls or someone's going to show up or the supply rep's going to show up. Whatever works for you, because you're probably going to want access to your computers in order to pull data. and things of that nature. And if you look at this checklist as I go through it with you, obviously the data that you need you can have to hand or on a laptop, so you can pull it up at a moment's notice as you go through. All right, so let's look at this. This is the 2026 or new year planning worksheet. All right, so what's step one? What are we going to do? We're going to do a year-end post-mortem, like a reality check. We're going to take a look at where we're at year over year. You might go, well, Jeff, how are we going to do this if we're doing it December 15th? And to a large degree, you're right, because you're not going to have the full returns of the year that you're already in. So in that case, you can break some of this down by month. Some of this is more of a something like percentages, which it really doesn't matter that the year isn't over yet unless there's a material change in the last 2 weeks of the year. But things like production, collection, new patients, and profitability are not going to, the full returns won't be in. So you can use a number to divide it. If you're 11 and a half months into the year versus 12, you can look at the monthly average to see how you're holding up. If I did, $1 million last year and I did 1.2 this year, then I did 80 something a month last year and 100 a month this year. Even though it's mid-November or December rather, I can tell that. So what numbers are we looking at here? And this is on the sheet. We've got collections, production, profit, our profit margin percentage, new patients, treatment acceptance percentage, collections divided by staff, and payroll percentage of collections and AR over 60 days. And what am I doing? I'm looking at the prior year's numbers against this year to date's numbers and what kind of a change I'm seeing. And if there's any particular notations I want to make, like we were closed for a month or whatever, there's a blank in there where I can make the notation. So obviously collection, production, new patients, an AR over 60 days is pretty self-explanatory to most people. But let's dig into some of these other numbers. First one's profitability, which if you keep an up-to-date P&L, you should be able to see at least what your account is calling profit or you're calling profit. You can take a look at that. And what the margin is. Now, I've mentioned this before, and this can get screwed up a little bit depending upon how the owner-doctor compensates themselves, but I want you to just think with this from a math perspective. If I'm a doctor and I have a dental practice, and I have somebody in there working for me, so I don't really do anything other than own my business. I have a dental license, I own this dental practice, I have an associate doctor working in this practice, and I'm paying them, let's say, 30% of production, right? And by production, I mean what's actually going to be collected. So I'm going to have somebody bring that up. Well, I don't you mean collections. What's actually going to be collected? So if somebody pays us $10,000 and we're doing 15%, we're doing no interest financing, so we're eating 15%, I'm only paying them the 30% on the $8,500 I have left over. Just to be clear. So when I say production, I mean what we're going to collect. So I'm paying them 30% of their production. So if I do nothing in this practice other than provide oversight and own the business, I check lab cases and financial oversight, how much should I net? And the answer is at least 20%. That's the answer, at least 20%. 23 to 24 is even better. I've seen 27, but 20 is the floor. So assuming you could apply this to satellite practices. So if I have a satellite practice with an associate in it, and that practice is producing 100 a month and collecting 100 a month, I should be netting at least 20. Now I might reinvest that into chairs or whatever, but whatever. So when you're looking at profit, sometimes this number might be tricky if you're in the practice chair side, because you may be getting kind of a token salary. You get $6,000 a month at the owner doctor, and then you disperse $15,000 a month in profit because that's what your accountant told you to do. I'm not telling you any of these are right, by the way. I'm not an attorney or an accountant. But the point being is that may skew your profit a little bit, because if you had put an associate in there in your place, you'd have to pay them at least 30%. So you at least, if the numbers are being kept consistently, like we calculate our profit using this formula, and we did it this year and next year the same way, I should have something to compare. That's the most important thing. All right, so if I'm counting it this way, these are the things, and I'm counting it the same way the following year, then it's a worthwhile number. All right, so I would want to look at what my number is as well as what my margins are, but that's what we're looking at. We're looking at that bottom line on the P&L. Treatment acceptance percentage. Now, you could go crazy with this one, but let's just keep it real simple. Treatment presented versus treatment accepted. Treatment presented versus treatment accepted. So you presented a $10,000 case, and the patient opted to only do what insurance covers, so you did 2 crowns. All right, so let's say your crown fee is, I don't know, $1,200. So then your treatment accepted there was $2,400 and your treatment presented was $10,000. So you should be able to pull this up. Most dental softwares do this, but you can kind of pull it up for the year, for last year, and for this year, year to date in this case, because you're doing this in mid-December, and get an idea of how you're doing as a percentage. We're not looking for the number, we're looking for percentage, which again, in that example I started with, 2,400 accepted, 10,000 presented, the percent is 24%, obviously. Then we have this number, collections divided by staff. Now this one's tricky. Now this is important because this is an efficiency statistic. But let's say I have a practice and we're doing 100 a month and we have 10 staff. Well, the collections divided by staff are $10,000. So let's say I add an additional staff member. What in theory should happen to my collections? They should, within short order, for the person has time to kind of get their feet wet and figure out what's going on around them, the collections for the practice should go to 110. That's sort of the marker. Okay, we went from 100 with 10 staff to 110 with 11 staff. Ideally, as I train these staff more and more and they become more efficient, that number of 10,000 may go up. So it doesn't always stay the same. Maybe now each staff member is worth $11,000, or $12,000 or $13,000. You get the general nature of this. But I want to look at collections divided by staff last year and collections divided by staff this year. Now, this one's tricky because it depends on how many staff you have at any given time, which can be completely crazy. And part-time staff, you want to count as a half, right? So what I would do is take a look at it on a month-by-month basis. I'm just thinking if I had to calculate this. We keep this statistic here at MGE actually on a weekly basis. So if I run it for a year, it looks goofy as all get out because it adds up every week. So it looks like, it's crazy. So I would just look at your average number of staff for the year and how much you collected for the year. In the case of the current year that you're in, it's year to date. So I had 10 staff last year and we collected $1 million. So each staff member is worth $100,000. All right. And then payroll as a percentage collections. Now, if you're going to do this, this is just to see if your payroll is creeping high or low because you want to compare last year to this year or year to date. For that, what you would probably do is you'd want to make sure your collections match. For year to date, you want to check collections matching the last pay period, collections through the last pay period. But for this, the number I'm looking for, I'm not counting doctor or owner-doctor compensation. All right? So if I have an associate and me, I'm the owner doctor, we're taking whatever me and the associate get paid and pull that out of the equation. It's just the rest of the staff, the hygienist, the manager, any other staff, the lab tech that's working in the practice, any other staff. And I want to take their combined payroll, okay, including payroll taxes. In the United States, that would be things like FICA, Social Security and Medicare. In Canada, there are other calculations, and we have a lot of Canadian listeners. Unless there's somebody to give you another algorithm to use, there's things like CPP and EI, right? Employment insurance. So, but let's say, take the U.S. for a second. Your number should be no higher than 22.5%. That's sort of the rule of thumb. Now, it probably is going to be higher. I've gotten into it on prior episodes as to why. But that's the number you want to see. But in any event, we're checking before and after here. So let's say in 2024, your number was 27%. Then you check 2025 year to date, it's at 25. Okay, you're not at that 22.5 yet, but it's getting better, so I wouldn't flip my lid at that point. It's improving, so you're doing something right, all right? In Canada, the number you're looking for is 20.9%, not including employer payroll taxes. So not including taxes that you have to pay on top of what you're paying the employee. In the U.S., it's 22.5 and does include employer payroll taxes. In Canada, it's 20.9 and does not because there are some variables depending on your province, okay? All right, so you're going to take a look at these numbers for 2024, and then you're going to take a look at them for 2025, look at the percentage change for better or worse, and any particular notes about each, all right? Now, step 2, and this is part of this. Actually, I'm sorry, it has a step 2, but it's part of step 1. Let me rephrase that. Cancel, I just said that. You're on step 1. What's the next thing we're going to do after we look at the stats? We're going to make a list of any wins we had, like areas we really succeeded last year, wins, things that we were very happy about. And if we know, we're going to list why did we have those wins, like what caused that. Oh, collections or hygiene department doubled. What happened? Well, we hired a hygiene coordinator and they filled the schedule. Okay, good. And then we're going to look for any losses that we had. Places we didn't win last year, okay? Things that we did. Okay, we did this marketing campaign. We lost $1 billion. Okay, why? Well, the marketing campaign was sent to the wrong people, whatever, right? Next step is we're going to take a look at a little bit of reflection here. We're going to look at what were we most proud of last year, make a list of those things. And then we're going to take a look and decide if we had to live this year over again, because again, we're doing this for 2025 to plan for 26. If we had to live this year over again, what would we do differently? All right, so we're looking at the good and the bad and the stats. That's where we are so far. So we've now got a pretty good, clear-cut idea of what we're doing well and what we would like to change. Now we move on to the next step. Step 2, we're going to define 2026. So the first thing we're going to do is sort of, and I hate to use this word, but like set a vision, because sometimes people go a bit, they don't really nail things down with this, right? But what I would do is take a look at what do we want the practice to look like at the end of 2026? Like, what is this going to look like here? And by that, I don't mean we've painted the walls, unless that's really a critical problem for you, in which case you could probably just do that now. But what is this practice going to look like at the end of 2026? All right, well, right now we have 6 hygiene days. We're going to have 12 hygiene days by the end of 2026. Right now we're collecting $130,000 a month. By the end of 2026, we're going to consistently be collecting $220,000. Our inactive patient base has 4,000 people in it. By the end of 26, there's only going to be 2. Like, whatever that is, you want to really envision it. By envision, I don't mean make a, dream it up, but really lay out what would this look like. If I took a snapshot of your practice at the end of 26, what would it look like? What would I see? This is what you want to decide here when you look at your vision. And then you're going to take a look at various targets, your growth targets and your profit targets. How much growth are we looking to have in the most important areas, new patient production collections, and what kind of profitability do we want at the end of the year? All right, and then we're going to look at if there's any major changes or accomplishments that we want to have by the end of 26. Like, we want to add 2 more chairs, or, we want to make sure that these 2 assistants are certified as EFTAs, they finish their EFTA program. Whatever that may be, major accomplishments by the end of 26, what are those going to be? We're kind of assessing what 26 is going to look like. We then move on to step 3. And there's 7 steps in this, really 8, but they're not too bad. So we're on step 3 now. So we've already decided, or we've taken a look at what last year looks like versus this year, and we've decided what we want next year to look like. So now we have to figure out what are the big picture important actions that have to occur to reach these targets. Now, if you've looked at the stats and you've got your vision of what you want it to look like, the points that need to be improved should be painfully obvious. You see, like, let's say one of the things you realize is a problem is your schedule's a disaster. You're always running behind. There's tons of openings on it, etc. And if it was just full and scheduled normally, you'd make an extra $30,000 a month. Well, that would be a major target or thing we want to attack. Do you see? But we want to look at what actions have to occur to pull off the targets that we just envisioned in step 2, which then, and that might be 5 targets, 10 targets. Don't kill yourself with this. Keep it big picture. Instead of going, I'm going to hire a schedule coordinator. I'm going to train said schedule coordinator. I'm going to reorganize the schedule. I'm going to decide how long procedures take, and I have this 50 steps. That doesn't go on here. It's going to be, I'm going to sort out the scheduling area and put somebody stable on the job of schedule coordinator. That would be a big picture step. That's all we want here right now, okay? We then move on to step 4, which is now we have to assign responsibility to these targets. So I've set targets like get a schedule coordinator and get them stable and, having a productive schedule, right? Well, who's going to do that? Who is accountable for that target? Okay, it's the office manager or the production executive, the back office manager, whatever it is. But somebody has to be responsible. If you don't assign responsibility, it is never going to get done. There'll be a bunch of finger pointing when you end up in your review meetings to see why this didn't get done, because it was nobody's job, you see. All right, so now we've assigned responsibilities. Then when you get to step 5, because you've made a list of things that you want to get done, I would start really looking at priorities and sequencing now. So, one of the things that are a priority, let's say you're running out of space, you need to add an operatory, but you're not planning on adding it until June, right? Well, there are things you have to get done before June, so you would list the targets that you want to get done before June. So you kind of look at the big picture again, all these things you just decided, and kind of figure out when they're going to get done by this date. Okay, this one's done by March, this one's done by April, etc. So now you've sort of gotten the big picture, because here's my viewpoint, okay? If assuming I have a trained office manager and we had a target of getting a stable scheduler on post, let's say we didn't have a schedule coordinator, or we decided we wanted a reactivation in charge or a hygiene coordinator, whatever that is, and they accept responsibility to do that target, I'm not going to sit down and figure out how they're going to do that target. That's part of their job. That's why they have that job. Now, if they're incapable of doing that, I would only assume it's because they're new. But if this person's been with you for a while, then they need to figure it out. Maybe they need some training or whatever. But even that, I say, is up to them. If I was given an objective to accomplish and I didn't know how to do it, I wouldn't wait around for my boss to show me how. I would try to figure it out or go, hey, I'm studying this to learn how to do this. Is this what you wanted me to look at? Something to figure out so I can actually do what I'm being asked to do and I've agreed to do. So I'm not going to write that down on this list. I already know that Jane, the office manager, has agreed to handle this target. So Jane's going to handle it, and Jane will figure it out, and Jane's supposed to have it done by March, okay? So now it comes down to oversight. We could sit here at the middle of December of 2025 and make a bunch of targets and who's going to do what, but if we don't talk about this again until December of 2026, who knows what's going to get done? So there has to be some regular oversight. Now, you have different types of meetings in a dental practice. You might have a morning production meeting. You might have staff meetings, things of that nature. Usually when I would check on these types of targets would be at weekly executive meetings. You should be having weekly exec meetings. That's where you sort of check up on things. Hey, and then the office manager can say, hey, I've got 2 scheduler prospects. They look really good. Blah, 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 blah. I should have one hired by next week. This is where you can kind of keep your master list of targets, which we'll have here in a minute, and you can see how you're progressing based against the time that you've assigned to these targets as the year goes on. And then on a quarterly basis, I'd have a little bit of a leadership review where you have a bit of a bigger executive meeting to review this stuff and look at the statistics and see how things are going overall in the practice. So we've got day-to-day, you may check in with each other. Weekly, you're going over what's gotten done. And then on a quarterly basis, you're looking at where you're at with relation to the targets you've set for the year. All right, and then that's the planning you're going to do with your executives. So everybody, we're going to go over the list you're going to use as a summary before you're done here in a second. But I wanted to make a point that once you've gone over this stuff and you figured it out, you do want to get the staff on board. So most likely you would take the targets that are applicable to the staff that the staff should know about and bring those up at your kickoff staff meeting in January. Like your first meeting of the year, you go, okay, here we planned out next year. This is what we're looking to accomplish next year. Here are our goals. These are the big actions we're going to get done, etc., to make sure everybody understands and is on board and has no questions about what it is you're trying to do. Now, once this is done, what you're going to want to do as the owner doctor, as well as anybody else who helps you with finances, is a full financial review. Now, this may not happen on December 15th. You might do this in early January. But this is where you want to, if you're not doing this on a regular basis, this is where you do a deep dive on expenses and really audit your expenses and identify any areas that need improvements. You should at least do this once a year. I would definitely perform oversight monthly, maybe a little bit more deeper quarterly, and then every 6 months to a year, do a full review of your finances because things can slowly spin out of control, especially variable items, things like payroll, lab supplies, marketing, etc. Look at my credit card statements. Is there anything I've been paying for? I'm like, gosh, I don't even use that anymore. Things like this, right? And then I would take a look if there are any areas that need to be cut, improved, added to, etc. All right, so now we've got all our targets, and you're doing that after this meeting, by the way. So we got all our targets. We do a little summary, wins and losses, our vision, major changes, sequence of action, when we're going to meet, etc. And then we make sort of a final list, and we give a copy to everybody who was in the exec meeting because this is sort of going to be our guide for the upcoming year. So we're all aware of it, and we're checking in regularly to make sure that it's actually being accomplished. Now, someone could look at this and go, gee, Jeff, that's really simple. It's not all that complex. And you're absolutely right. Like I said, I could lay some stuff on you that would take me 3 days to explain with a seminar. But I want to give you something. Again, I'm assuming you're not sitting around idly dreaming new things up for your practice to do. You're working. So I wanted to at least make sure you do something because most people don't do anything. They do very little planning other than saying, gee, I would like to collect X amount next year. And you could even plan longer than a year. There's nothing wrong with that. 10 years from now, I want to be at this point and sell or whatever it might be. But the problem with super long range planning is things change. So imagine if you had made a 5-year plan. That sounds like something the Soviet Union used to do. Pardon me. But let's say you did a 5-year plan and you did it in 2019. Well, wouldn't your plan have changed slightly in 2020, at least for a little bit? Just saying. So I can have long-term goals like, hey, by this age, I'd like to be blah, or by this year, I'd like to do blah. But then I'm really putting my, shoulder to the wheel here every year to figure out exactly what I have to do each year to pull off each year towards that longer-term goal. Anyway, hope that wasn't too crazy. I wanted to keep it simple because I wanted to give you something easy to do that puts you, because some planning is better than none. This is really that type of a case. I've talked about this before. Having some type of manual or some type of explanation for a job is better than no explanation. This applies to planning as well. Some planning is better than no planning. So I would use this, right? I do hope it helps you. And, look, here's to you having an amazing 2026 where you hit every target that you set. All right, and that's all I have for you this week. Don't forget, I left the link to the planning checklist on the episode webpage. You can download that. And if you want to find out more about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Folks, have a great week, and I will see you at the next episode.